Mr. Chairman, for the Management Council meeting on November 7th, 2024, Senator Hicks? Senator Kinski?
Here.
Senator Nethercott? Senator Rothfuss? Representative Nyman?
Here.
Representative Stith?
Here.
Representative Yin? Representative Zwanitzer? Vice Chairman Summers?
Here.
Chairman Driscoll? You have a quorum.
Okay, welcome everybody to Management Council. I'm not going to go through all the decorum stuff. I think everybody in here pretty well has got it down where we're at on the decorum end of it. Approval of minutes. We have a motion on the minutes.
Move for the approval of minutes. Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes have been approved. We're going to move on to the general session calendar. We've got, I believe, 3 choices on the calendar, and Director Olbrecht, welcome, and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We have provided you with 4 different options for the 2025 general session calendar, and I think it's important to note that this calendar is simply a recommendation from Management Council to the 2 chambers. It doesn't carry the force and effect of legislative rule, but it's certainly helpful for legislators, the public, and staff to be able to plan what their session will look like. And so all 4 of these proposed schedules are a 37-day schedule. That would leave 3 days that could be used in the 2026 budget session. That's a trend we've done for, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 legislatures, at least. Schedule A, Mr. Chairman, has 2 distinctions from the other calendars that we'll discuss. The first is it has 2 recesses, one for Martin Luther King Day holiday and another for President's Day holiday. And those would be on Monday, January 20th for Martin Luther King Day holiday, and also for President's Day on Monday, February 17th. The session, of course, required by the Constitution, starts on January 14th. That's a Tuesday. And the other thing to really notice within these 4 versions is when the Committee of the Whole on the budget bill will start. Under Schedule A, that starts, Committee of the Whole starts on February 3rd. That's a Monday. You've, of course, have 2 days for Committee of the Whole on the budget bill. So that extends to February 4th. Under this calendar, and this is different for each one, then second reading of the budget bill would be on the 5th. You have a break, what we refer to as a dead day, kind of hearkening back to my law school finals terminology there. February 6th, Thursday, February 6th would have no reading of the budget bill, and then third reading in both houses of the mirror budget bill would be on Friday, February 7th. If we work down through this schedule, March 5th, day 35 would be last day for third reading in each house. We would have so March 6th and 7th would simply be days for conference committees, concurrences, and also potential veto overrides. Crossover would be on February 12th. That would be the last day for third reading in the House of Origin. Mr. Chairman, on the next one, titled Schedule B, this calendar option does not have a Martin Luther King Day holiday or recess for the legislature, so would meet on Monday, January 20th, but would take a President's Day holiday on Monday, February 17th. This one has budget bill starting same day, Monday, February 3rd, wrapping up on Friday, February 7th. And the last day for third reading would again be the same Wednesday, February 12th, and then would adjourn on March 6th, which would be a Thursday. Would have that no third reading or no reading of the budget bill on Thursday, February 6th again, but would start second reading on February 5th immediately after Committee of the Whole on the budget bill ended on February 4th. Option C, Mr. Chairman, again, only one holiday, and that's President's Day recess on Monday, February 17th. Here's the difference between Schedule C and Schedule B, is that Committee of the Whole would start on the budget bill on Friday, January 31st on this. Then Committee of the Whole on the budget would extend to Monday, February 3rd. And then we would take a day off on Tuesday, February 4th between Committee of the Whole and second reading of the budget bill in both houses. Come back for second reading on February 5th, take a day off again on February 6th, and then conclude third reading of the budget bill on Friday, February 7th. Mr. Chairman, again, we would, under this schedule, adjourn on March 6th, a Thursday. I should probably mention at this point, and maybe pass it over to Don quickly, on when the budget bill is likely to be available to the public.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Management Council, I believe that the Craig report will be available as early as it ever has in terms of the session. Part of that is due to the lateness that the session starts, not that Craig is necessarily acting in advance. But typically, the first week of the session after the ceremonies of Tuesday and Wednesday, JAC will meet and have any callbacks from their December budget hearings. And that second week, beginning January 20th through Friday, January 24th, is typically when they would mark up the supplemental budget bill. That can be accommodated in 2 or 3 days rather than the full 5, and has been sometimes, but we tend to include that full 5 as a just in case. That subsequent week is usually used to prepare the bill. And it's not just budget fiscal staff writing it, it's the legal reviews of the footnotes that are written, the Section 300s that are written, and the bill processing. So here's the key here is we would anticipate the budget bill to be available on or about Thursday, January 30th. This would provide essentially 4 days, and 2 of those are weekends, admittedly, for the bill to be available to the public, online, agencies reviewing it, members of the press and government relations folks, prior to Committee of the Whole work on the following Monday. So it's not a tremendous amount, but keep in mind this is not the budget session where the budget is available on the first day, or at least in the last 3 budget sessions has been available on the first day of the session. The challenge with Schedule C and D, and these are, I think, in part brought by your Tech and Process Select Committee, they advocate for more time between the readings of the budget to assess amendments. In doing so, you're shifting what time is available for the public to have the budget in advance. So while there is more time between readings to contemplate budget amendments from your colleagues, there will be less time, in fact 1 day, between when the budget is available, put on sponsored and introduced, and the committee of the whole commencing on Friday, January 30th, under both Schedules C and D. So it's kind of a trade-off between time early on for the public to review and contemplate the contents of the supplemental budget, or time between readings to contemplate amendments.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of Management Council, that's why we're presenting option C and D today, is to effectuate the potential rule change that the Legislative Tech and Process Select Committee has proposed. And that's creating an extra day between Committee of the Whole and second reading on the budget bill for amendments to be posted and available to members and the public. It won't be for a full 24 hours, but it'll be for a majority of a day. We'll discuss this in detail more when we get to that agenda item, but for second reading and third reading budget bill amendments, in a nutshell, they will need to be into the LSO attorney's office for either the House or the Senate by the conclusion of the prior reading or by the conclusion of Committee of the Whole, and then they need to be approved by that next morning by 10 a.m. And then the attorney's offices with budget fiscal will make any conforming amendments required within those amendments, number them, and then post them to the website as soon as they can and distribute them. It'll probably take at least a couple hours after 10 o'clock for those to be distributed, and it could take a little longer. But then the next reading cannot start until 24 hours have passed after that 10 o'clock deadline the day before. So in Schedule D, if Committee of the Whole ends on February 3rd, then second reading budget bill amendments would need to be into the LSO attorney's offices by the conclusion of Committee of the Whole on February 3rd. They would need to then be approved by 10 a.m. on the morning of February 4th. And then second reading of the budget bill could not start until after 10 a.m. on February 5th. And then, Mr. Chairman, same with third reading amendments. Third reading amendments would need to be into LSO by the conclusion of second reading on the budget bill on February 5th, need to be approved by 10 o'clock on February 6th. And then third reading of the budget bill could not start until 10 a.m. on February 7th. So, Mr. Chairman, and then just quickly, the other difference between on Schedule D, it's got that extra day between second and third reading on the budget bill, but it also has a Martin Luther King Day recess on January 20th. So I think I hit the highlights on those four options.
Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a question back to Dawn. Is there any chance that it'll be, that the budget will be ready prior to the 30th? Or is that just kind of the worst case scenario, the 30th, or could it slop the other way? I know it all depends on how things run, but how firm is that date?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, it is not a firm date. It really is dependent upon the complexity of the changes. If there are limited number of changes, then there's certainly opportunity to move that back a day or two. And that day or two, maybe one day comes from writing and one day comes from committee work if it's less than challenging. If it is a more full-blown change, then I think it will be difficult, in fact, to meet the that Thursday deadline. Historically, we have produced the supplemental budget as late as Sunday, which I know is not ideal at all. But there, in the last 20 years, there have been at least 2 times where we have printed it late Sunday night for committee of the whole on Monday. So I think the Thursday is what I would describe as realistic, but there's a chance that it could be a little earlier.
Further questions, committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I guess there is one follow-up. There's nothing to say that you have to take 2 days to do the cow. I've remembered seeing cow done on the budget in a day, and particularly on a supplemental budget, I think it's possible. So you probably within this calendar, you have some flexibility to move some of that around too. The presiding officers would have some ability. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I think that is absolutely correct. And we don't have any experience under the alternative amendment schedule. I think from a administrative standpoint, there could be some challenges and there could be some benefits both. And having not have experience, but for example, if you do committee of the whole in 1 day, I'm expecting that would be a long day. So you might finish hypothetically at 9 or 10 at night. That also means that the deadline for amendments on second reading is not 5 p.m. like it has been historically, it's 10 p.m., which means between 10 p.m. and realistically 8 a.m., we will have to write dozens, maybe several dozen amendments, get that to the sponsor, and then have them approve it by the following 10 a.m. Alternatively, if it's split over 2 days, you might finish committee of the whole at 3, 4, 5 p.m., which would give a little bit more time to prepare those amendments. So some of these things are, having not had the experience of the alternative Cs and Ds, we'll see how those.
Mr. Co-Chair,
Senator Kinski.
and I'm sorry if this has already been answered, but are these calendars for a 38-day session or a 40-day session? 37?
37, I believe, with 3 extra.
Okay, so there's a little bit of latitude. I won't be here, so I don't have a dog in the hunt, but it just occurs to me that, with a new JAC, they probably could use as much time to get the budget ready as possible, even though it means that, that budget, the public gets 1 day to look at it. I don't know that that's exactly accurate because they'll probably be tuned into the JAC meetings to see every amendment and every step of the way. I just tend to think that for a new committee, giving them as much time to get that budget out to the floor as possible, an extra day or 2 would be appropriate. That's just my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Good comments. Further thoughts or questions from the committee? I like Mr. Richards' suggestion, only 2 dozen amendments. Was that a suggestion for a rule change? So with that, I thank you. We'll go to public comment and we'll go back to the committee. Any public comment? Anything online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Zonisser.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Which of these schedules most closely follows the 2023 general session? Is that option 1?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Option A most aligns with what we did in the last general session. Mr. Chairman, you have kind of gone back and forth on that first holiday, Martin Luther King Day. Some years you've done that, and some years you haven't. And the main reason is because it's just the second week of the session. So the legislature has gone back and forth on that first holiday, but has consistently taken the second holiday just because of the timing of the session.
And Mr. Chairman, I think 2 years ago, you actually delayed that holiday for a week and took the last Monday in January off, or at least a week after the Martin Luther King holiday.
I believe that's accurate.
Thank you. Last chance of public comment. Public comment's closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Let's hear the discussions. Don't see anybody moving much. We got four choices here. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, I think, if I had my choice, I would say that we do 4-day weeks just in general across the board. I don't think that's highly likely, but I think that gives more time for people to spend with their families and also gives more time for the public to really follow what we're doing when we move at such an accelerated pace that we do anyways. But given the choice between the 4 schedules in front of us, I would probably choose the one with MLK Day and taking into account the possible rule change, which I think is Schedule D, if I'm correct.
Thank you. I believe C and D both would hit that. Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to echo the thoughts of the good senator to my left. With the changes that are coming, we're going to want as much time for this new appropriations team to be able to get their eyes on this and put this thing together and be able to present it. And so my thinking is at this point is we want to allow for as much time as we possibly can for that. And so I would support that sentiment. I also am very intrigued with the idea of Mr. Representative Yin to be able to offer more time for the people to be able to get back home to their families and to have more time to be able to put their eyes on this legislation, as important as it is. I think is a discussion that we need to have and offer that opportunity to be discussed and to really look at that, because I do think if we ranked a little larger during the week and be able to offer not only the legislators, but staff the ability to have more time to be able to get some things done. I think that's a very good discussion. I appreciate that thought.
Representative Nyman, what's your option? I would say option D. Okay, thank you.
D?
C. C.
Is that a motion?
Can be. Any further discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Just on that C versus D concept for Representative Nyman, I guess I'm not understanding, based on his comments, why he just chose C over D. D seems like the one that would favor those comments. So, Representative Nyman, based on what you said, I would have expected you to choose D, and then you said no C. So, B. Okay. And Mr. Chairman, B. Boy or Baker, question I have there, it doesn't have that extra day off, and the A schedule is the one that has the extra day off. If there was interest in having extra time to get home, it would be the A provision of those two. And I was just trying to see if that was, yeah, they're incompatible interests. So
You can't have it both ways.
I'm curious about that. It does seem like there are 2 different issues, and rather than picking the schedule, it's almost like we should be deciding, do we want the extra day off? Yes, no, and which process do we want? And then based on that, figuring it out. To me, the extra day off seems beneficial. I do like it 1 week later. I was a big proponent for that when we did it several years ago. It's not particularly handy to have that weekend in the second week. We haven't done enough to need to get back and do the work on it, but it is MLK Day. And the other thing I guess I would just throw out there is it's also Inauguration Day. I don't know if any members are planning on attending inauguration, but
You're going up.
I'm probably not making it this year. But I have in the past, and it would be handy to have that available to legislators. I don't know if that's something that anybody wants to advocate for, but if things had gone differently, I'd be advocating for it on that basis.
Mr. Co-Chair,
Senator Kinski.
question for staff. What would it take on Schedule B to add that extra day off in? I know when I show up, I'm always feeling like I want to get out of here as soon as we can, and then you get about midway through the session, you think, we probably should have had a few more days off programmed in here. How would you put an extra day into B, that extra day off?
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's just A. Yeah. So A and B are the same schedule except for the first holiday off is represented in Schedule A, the Monday, January 20th being off.
And where is it on B?
So B, Mr. Chairman, Senator, there's only one holiday that's the legislature is recessing for, President's Day, on Monday, February 17th. In Schedule A, there's two holiday recesses, on Monday, January 20th, and then again on Monday, February 17th. And so that pushes the end date for the session from Thursday, March 6th, under Schedule B, with one holiday, for two holidays on Schedule A, then you'll adjourn on Friday, March 7th.
So, Mr. Co-Chair, couldn't we add a Monday, January 20 day off into Schedule B?
You can, but then it would just be Schedule A.
That's the only difference?
Right, that's it.
I see, okay.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know,
February
there's
4 and
nothing written in
February
stone,
3.
we have to have a 37-day. We could do a 38-day
That's
and
February
take
4,
B
that's
and add
February
in
3.
that extra day that would allow for the rule change and allow for people to be able to see the amendments. That still gives 2 extra days, not 3, but 2 extra days for the budget session. So am I missing something, or would that in fact work?
Mr. Chairman, that would work, but let me just caution you that if you go with 38 days, 2 holidays, and then the 2 days in between committee of the whole and second reading on the budget, and then second reading and third reading, you're gonna push the end of the session into a Monday.
That's with 2 holidays, but if you
Right.
go with schedules, if you go with Schedule B and add in the day you need to make sure that the amendments work, that people can see the amendments, then we're fine. 1 holiday, does that schedule in fact work?
So Mr. Chairman, I think that's Schedule C. Yeah,
Well, C, it looks to me like,
You begin
yeah,
the budget
it's
on
just C. I guess
31st.
C is the day, right? Yeah.
right, but that's just on 37 days.
No, yeah. Yeah, C allows for, yeah, C's good.
Mr. Co-Chair, except on C, you've got the budget consideration beginning on the 31st. And I think the idea is to push it a few more days, just to give our new JAC a little more time, which directs us to A or B.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me just caution, and Senator Kinski, I understand where you're going with that, but here's going to be the problem with that then, is if we push that committee of the whole to Monday, first day of committee of the whole on Monday, and you have 2 days of committee of the whole, and then a day in between each reading, then that would be Monday for committee of the whole, Tuesday committee of the whole, off on Wednesday, second reading Thursday, off on Friday, and you would have the budget then on the next Monday. And that's President's Day, so you'll actually won't do it until Tuesday. And that will be a very, very limited time to do your JCC, come together for that. That has taken a long time, the last few years. And that will very much compress your opportunity to do a budget override, veto override, excuse me. So everything with this is a trade-off. And, you can then, if you wanted to do that, you can add more days at the end of the calendar if you want. And those 3 days you've got to play with. And we could go to 40 days. But that would just be the choice, how long you want to come back in March.
And then also, Mr. Chairman, is it just leaves you no wiggle room for a budget session. And you have consistently, like Matt said at the beginning, you have consistently hung around that 37-day schedule for a general session, just in case you need those. And we have used those extra days for a budget session, not last year, but we have used them before. So like Matt said, it is a trade-off.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So Schedule B that allows for the cow on a Monday, you add in an extra day, I still don't understand. If you add in an extra day, I still don't understand where that's going to cause a huge problem. If you don't have 3 days available in a budget session, you're not going to use 3 days. You'll use 2 days and you'll figure out a schedule that works with 2 extra days. I don't understand what the angst is on adding an extra day into Schedule B we do it on Monday. I don't see where that is a harm. Third reading would be on a Monday, right?
Is there another comment?
Well, yeah, or on Tuesday.
Can you turn your mic on? I didn't hear what you said. Could you repeat it?
Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, I think what the speaker is asking for is Schedule A, but instead of recess on Monday, January 20th, we just meet as normal.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and comment on that as well. I actually think adding a day and having only 2 left over, going to a Monday, is not a bad deal for a couple of reasons. One, that's when you're in conference committee and it actually gives a weekend for them to work if they have to. Second, back to governor overrides, we tend to leave on a Friday. We tend to get a little hot water before because everybody's in a hurry to get home and leave. And if you finish on a Monday, it gets a lot easier to add 1 or 2 days if you have to do overrides. And nobody ever wants to come back to do overrides very bad. When we really get there, everybody's at home with their family and they're like, I'll just stay home. And to me, it makes it a lot easier to have that option to add those days to do a couple overrides if you need to. So I kind of favor that. It gives us the time and the break. So Senator Kinski?
Yeah, Mr. Co-Chair, I can anticipate that on that Friday, everybody will be cursing whoever made us stay until Monday, but I'm with you. And I wonder if staff, I'd like to see a 40-day schedule to try and attenuate the pressure to, for a quick JCC. This is going to be a different session than anything that I've seen in 10 years. And I tend to think a 40-day schedule with adjournment on Wednesday. Given, you think about it, JAC is going to have very few people that have prior budget experience. And it's just going to be a new thing. So I would like to see, I'm not advocating for a 40-day schedule. I'd like to see a 40-day schedule and what that does in terms of attenuating some of the pressure to go till 10 o'clock at night on the first reading, to try and hurry up the JCC so we have veto overrides. And I'd like to see a 40-day schedule. That's me, and if we have to pick this up again tomorrow morning to look at a 40-day schedule, or maybe this afternoon, then so be it. That's my thoughts on it, Mr. President. And of course, I won't be here, so they'll be cursing me for coming up with the 40-day schedule if we're here till on a Friday and having to be here through the following Wednesday. But I think this new legislature is going to need the time. I just think they're going to need the time.
Mr. Co-Chairman, and Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think 40 is too much, but I think, back to my 38-day, I think we have the ability to draft that up, right? And we could look at it tomorrow. And maybe we look at the 40-day tomorrow. And then it's just a matter of whether you want Martin Luther King in or out. And I think there needs to be some more options on the table. I like the idea of people being able to see the amendments. I think it's difficult, it's hard enough for the Appropriations Committee to get a handle on what amendments and how to react to them, let alone as a member of the body, to be able to look at any amendment and be able to judge it. You're just kind of, at that point, you're just scrolling, wondering, what's going on. So, and the public is plumb lost. And so I think it's worth looking at a 38-day.
Senator Roth.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any interest in going over 38 days. 38 days is rational. Doing it within that week is rational. An end date as late as day 37, Friday, March 7th, is reasonable. But unless there is some catastrophe at the end, and remember, we don't have to calendar it to come back for 2 days. We can always do that. We don't have to adjourn. We can come back for 2 more days. We can do veto overrides. We do not need a calendar to let us do that. In fact, we could stay longer probably, and gosh, please don't do that. At this point, we're setting the calendar for what we're intending to do so that people can schedule around it, so that people can be thoughtful. And while providing more flexibility, as Speaker Summers is talking about, looking at a 38-day schedule that goes till Friday, March 7th is a perfectly reasonable solution. I, for one, have no interest in going into that next week as a planned calendar. And I guess I would want someone to, be advocating and explaining why we should be specifically going to that, extending the session, providing additional costs, providing additional time when people have to travel back from the weekend. I mean, it's substantial to go a new week. So what are we gaining that we can't do, as we've done literally every year I've been in the legislature, in that number of weeks? What's so novel in a supplemental budget that we need to break new ground, forge a new week into the calendar for the first time and do things entirely differently? I'm curious.
Go, Chair.
Senator Kinski.
My colleague from the Ivory Tower, I love it when you say that anything over 38 is not rational, so let me speak to the irrational. I don't expect this group to approve a 40-day calendar. I'd just like to have it. And then it comes to the body, when they convene as to what it is that they want to do. I think you're going to find that this new legislative group is going to have a different work ethic. I think they're not going to be concerned about the difference between 38 and 40 days. I think they're going to be more concerned that they have the time to get it right. And so it would be, I feel it behooves us to at least have the 40-day, and they can consider that when ultimately it comes down to them to make the final determination as to the schedule. Again, I think it's rational in the sense that there's going to be a majority on appropriations that doesn't have as much experience. I think it's just going to take more time to get things done. And when you compress things like that, and as my colleague from Devil's Tower had said, you get to that Friday, things tend to get a little bit heated. I think it's because the time compression, everybody wants to get out of there. And if the new legislature decides, we'll be here till next Wednesday, that gives everybody the weekend to cool off a little bit. And if they tend to get their work done early, they can always adjourn early. It's an option that I think ought to be on the table for the larger body to consider. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This isn't a decision that's put to the larger body. That's not to say they couldn't change it, but this is a decision that's made by the Management Council and then it's planned to. So we are making the decision now, and we're making it based on the proposals that we have, and it's incumbent upon us to make it either today or tomorrow on behalf of the legislature. That really is one of the things that the Management Council is expressly tasked with, is setting the calendar for the session. Again, it's not a rule. It isn't something that can't be broken when we get to session. And almost every year we see some variation in how things go relative to the way the calendar is written. But our job is not to present options to the body. Our job is to set a calendar that will guide planning for the session. All of the staff, everybody understands the potentials for variation there, but we need to pick either one of these or some variation on it at this point in time. And, honestly, if there's no interest, and maybe we just do a straw poll or something, who wants more than 38 days? If there is sufficient interest here to see it, then we can ask staff to do that. But I don't want staff to go prepare 5 new calendars for us to consider tomorrow morning when none of us is interested in actually supporting any of those alternative options. It sounds like Senator Kinski is interested in potentially supporting one of those, but Mr. President, maybe that's what we need to do, is just see if there's enough interest to keep this discussion alive. I'm happy to make a motion on probably half of these. These are good options. These are the reasonable options that are available to us, and we have flexibility within those options.
So I'll comment a little that probably muddies it a tiny bit, and I'm happy with the straw poll. I actually had not ever considered to go into the Monday afterwards, and I realize it adds expense and it's a weekend, but I find it really weird, back to irrational. I'm one of the older ones here, along with you, Senator Ross, that's been around. We always end on a Friday at midnight, folks. We nearly are rolling it back. That's when irrational decisions get made. At the end, at the last minute of the last day, it always seems like we're all wore out. We're waiting on the other house, or they're waiting on us. And you don't make it home that night anywhere. If you do, you're dead on your feet. And I think it makes so much sense for that conference committee to have the weekend to actually sit down and figure out an honest conference, and that's particularly true with new approach members. And they come in Monday morning and present it, and you're probably done by noon if they've done a good job on the end of it. And otherwise, we tend to run back and forth on Friday at 10 o'clock at night and have pizza sitting around. So to me, I do believe from my end, it makes some sense to go over that weekend and add the one day to it. Representative Stiff?
Mr. President, thank you. As far as the supplemental budget goes, it seems to me that you really have to get the Joint Conference Committee report finally done and voted on at least 3 days before the session ends, or you give up your veto opportunity. So, so I don't think going to the extra Monday helps. I think if you're going to end on Friday, you've got to get your joint conference report done on Tuesday. Anyway, 2 other comments. Just happy to hear that Senator Rothfuss wants to attend the inauguration. I'm happy to hear that. And then I wanted to get input from Representative Nyman, since he'll be dealing with this, sort of, if having, after all the discussion, how he feels about it. This is not a problem I'm going to have to deal with.
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President, before we go there, I just would like to ask a question and then a word of caution, whereas I appreciate the senior members on this council wanting to change the way we've done things for over a decade. I'm really grateful for your consideration of not having a speaker on midnight on a Friday night. How refreshing. I'm not sure why we're doing that now than before, but I don't think that's a productive conversation right now. But as it might guide this analysis as to why we need 40 days when we never have in the history that I've been elected, perhaps some more information about that, which is how much does it cost each day that we're in session for staff, legislators? What is that expense?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to think if we've increased that number. For a long time, I said it was around $25,000 a day, but now I think it's closer to $40,000 a day with the increased per diem rates and increased staff expenses. The other thing to remember on that as well is when you hold it over a weekend, you get paid for both days of the weekend too.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can just follow up here. So we're looking at an additional maybe, it's $40,000 a day, 40, 80, 120. We're looking, well, that's 3 days. If we end on a Monday and have everybody drive back for a Monday conference committee adoption, I just don't know that that's prudent or wise, and particularly in light of Representative Stiff's comments. I would just like I'm surprised that this analysis is taking so long this morning and this has been so painful. And recircle back to what has been presented to us as 4 really great options that our seasoned and experienced and thoughtful LSO staff has prepared for us, recognizing our considerations and what works for everybody. And these options in front of us are good and provide flexibility that we may need during the session. And I would encourage us to adopt one of them here this morning, rather than continuing to struggle with this conversation, because I'm not sure that it's worth that effort.
Mr. Co-Chair, I don't want to drag it out any further than we have, but I would say this as to the cost of that extra day or days. My observation is that you come down, as the squeeze comes on in the final days of the legislature, to get a budget usually comes at the price of millions, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in additional spending. And if you take an extra 5 or 6 days at $40,000 a day, it's 0.0000000% of the money that gets spent, extra money that gets spent. So I suspect that, it's money well spent to take the time to get the budget right, as opposed to that Friday squeeze where the pressure is to yield to extra spending just to get a budget out the door. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thanks, Mr. President. So, looking at what we have available, Schedule C addresses the concern you raised, Mr. President, which is ensuring that we're not leaving on Friday night, that it's a Thursday night departure, and therefore it's already built in effectively that if we don't finish on time, we have an extra day available within the same week. So it's built to be considerate of, we didn't quite make it on time, we're going to need to roll over to the next morning. I believe that's also structured, and I would look to Don for the timing on this, that JCC would actually be meeting effectively over that weekend, that prior weekend, and finalizing, doing their work at that point, getting the finished product together, and presumably we would probably be voting on the budget on that Monday, I think, to ensure veto overrides. But Don, how does that schedule look on the C schedule?
Representative Zwanitzer?
Mr.
Go ahead.
That was a question.
Okay.
I know nobody was listening, but that was a question.
Okay. Question, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, unfortunately, because of the way that timing is structured for the veto, under option C, you would actually have to finish the JCC on the budget Friday preceding that final week. And it would actually give you a couple of extra days, but if you wait until Monday, technically he could run the clock out until Thursday at midnight, leaving you inability to override.
So in that, Mr. Chairman,
Senator Rothfuss.
in that instance then, if the governor did that, if we had the finalization on the Monday, we would have the opportunity then to come back on Friday if that game was played. We'd basically have to show up in the morning. We'd have to do our veto overrides that day, but we would technically have time. So it would be kind of an optional, if we had a cooperative governor, finished things up on Monday, did the over the weekend, everything would be just fine. If the governor decided that he just wanted us to hang out one day longer and spend some time with him, then we'd end up having to use the Friday. Is that accurate in my understanding how that would potentially play out?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, that is accurate. And I think just maybe add one small thing. If we got the budget bill to the governor delivered on Monday, March 3rd, you would also need to announce your intention to come back on Friday, March 7th, because the governor wouldn't know that he only had 3 days prior to your adjournment to get it back then. So, and really, it's a lot of work on the governor and his staff too. It's a heck of a lot of difference in trying to get their vetoes in 3 days than it is in 15 if you're going to be gone. So just this whole thing really is built on the veto overrides, on cooperation and understanding between the legislative and executive branch. So as a matter of collegiality, of interbranch cooperation, I would make that announcement on Monday, that you planned on coming back Friday.
Mr. Chairman, then, that's a nuance that we really haven't discussed much between the Schedule C and Schedule D then. It does sound like Schedule D is substantially better for that reason, that we really do, for that purpose, need to be effectively scheduling an end on Friday, March 7th, so that we have that capacity for the weekend to be used to finalize. Monday is then the signing of the Joint Conference Committee, goes to the governor, and then we've already effectively announced that Friday is going to be a work day for the legislature for overrides. Is that accurate? So realistically, we should be looking at a Friday adjournment?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, that's accurate if the Budget Bill Joint Conference Committee takes 3 weeks. You're right.
If we give them 3 weeks, they'll take 3.
That's probably right, yeah. So, but that's true, is that that would give, if the Joint Conference Committee came to an agreement on Friday, the 28th, then we could write the budget bill, finish, put that Joint Conference Committee in a budget bill to be signed on Monday, March 3rd. It would also need to be explained on the floor, and there's a bunch of background material LSO produces to help that process. So that would be a benefit.
But, Mr. Speaker, if they were to finish earlier and manage to keep it under a 3-week timeline for a joint conference, and they finished on, for example, Thursday, or, well, how many days, Don, typically they end up using the weekend. I guess they would probably have to finish on Wednesday realistically to get it voted on by Friday under the Schedule C scenario. Is that accurate?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, again, very similar to the speaker's question about the complexity of that would matter, but realistically, the JCC would need to complete their work by Wednesday. That would give you Thursday to write up their conclusions and present it on the floor on Friday.
Understood. Thank you. That's helpful.
Representative Zwanitzer, did you have some questions?
Oh, I have lots of questions, Mr. Chairman. But maybe just some points. I think at this stage, we have a somewhat fundamental understanding of what the supplemental budget may look like, at least what agencies have requested. Going into the session, when you start thinking the Constitution only allows us 60 days, we have, education lawsuit, probably decided the next year. I'm just thinking we have a pretty good feel for what's going to happen in the supplemental, I think, here in 3 months. We don't have a good feel for the actual budget in 2026. And so any extra days at that point, I think, are going to be a necessity from what I understand from, campaigns and people saying, we're going to redo the whole budget and cut a bunch of stuff. It's going to need extra time, I think. And so any days we can save to meet that constitutional 60-day, I think it's better for us to have a 36, 37-day schedule, because I do think we need a motion. I would throw out B right now and at least move that, and then if we need to amend B, at least we have a starting place to move the discussion down the field. But ultimately, I do think it's important, looking at the next 2 years, saving as many days as possible. I was here for a biennium when we did a 35-25. I thought it worked out fairly well that year, but we had a pretty big budget crunch and needed those 25 days. So let me move option B unless Senator Rothfuss wants to stop.
So there's been a motion, before the motion. He's made a motion. He'll either get seconded or not.
I move option B.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we can have discussion, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on the difference between B and C effectively is whether we use the technology process that we pass through that committee. That really is the essential difference. So that was going to be my point ahead of it, was that's the choice, is do we want that extra time for review of the amendments, or do we want to eliminate that, which really we're pre-deciding an entire section of the later discussion, because we haven't even gone through the justification for the technology process change to that. And so I'm asking the movant then, whether B or C is his favorite option. I was going to move Schedule C for that reason.
So I guess a question back, and remember this, this motion is amendable. So if you want to amend in a day between, between February 4th and February 5th, in between the cow, I guess, it'd be 3rd and 4th. So if you want to amend in a day between the cow readings, then you could do that. And we could actually, if you want to keep amending B, if we want to keep doing this, we can amend. Then we can get a calendar before we take a vote to actually see what it looks like, hear what staff's thoughts are. So is there any other discussion on this? Do you want to amend in a day in between the cows? Do you like B? Where are we at, folks? Representative Nyman, do you have any comments? Anybody want to amend in an extra day?
I was just waiting for Representative Zwanzer to decide whether he favored C or B. I'll vote for either. The work we did on the Technology Process Committee is the motivation for C. There was good public testimony and support for that, wanting transparency in the amendment process so that they could actually read the amendments before we voted on them. That seemed novel. We agreed. And that's what C gets us that B doesn't get us. As far as amendments, there is no other amendment. That it's not adding another day. B and C are exactly the same with the exception of that shift. So that would be my recommendation is Schedule C, but again, either of them is just fine. They both meet the overall objective.
So Senator Rothfuss, you could go with a 38-day schedule and amend in an extra day. You could, if anybody wanted to. If not, we're just going to continue with this base motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Representative Zwanzer.
I've been here long enough to believe that it's going to be 38 days. You can set the calendar for 37, but every year that we did a pool or any number of things, we were always here till Friday and halfway through the day, no matter how hard we tried. And I don't believe this year will be any different with a number of new legislators. So I think it's going to be 38. The question is where you want that extra day. As Senator Rothfuss mentioned, the Tech Process Committee is going to recommend, adding that day in during budget week for an entire day to look at amendments, which I'm going to bring that. So I probably should amend my motion to Plan C to be consistent throughout the day. If I could get a second to agree with moving to C. I think that day is going to go in wherever the two houses want it ultimately. So it doesn't really bother me B or C either. We just need to get a calendar there, and I think if you accept the Facility Tech Process Amendment this afternoon, C is the cleanest way to do it. Senator Rothfuss said.
Who is the
Stith.
I'll second that, just to keep the
Okay, so
discussion going.
we have amended the motion. Second agreed, so Schedule C is now so now we'll take comments on on Schedule C. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question for staff. If the last day of session is Thursday, March the 6th, does that mean that the Joint Conference Committee report on the supplemental budget needs to be done by Friday, February 28th in order to have a veto override opportunity on Thursday, March 6th?
Staff.
Mr. Chairman, so the bill would need to be signed and delivered to the governor on February, March 28th. He would then have March 3rd, 4th, and need to deliver the bill back to the legislature before midnight on Wednesday, March 5th. Then you would then have Thursday, March 6th for potential veto overrides. No, if you're not.
So just one caution to everybody. Schedule C, the budget hits the 30th. Cal starts on the 31st. The body and the public are only going to have one day to see the budget, and not even a whole day. So that's why, I liked section B and adding in a day, because in the end, you want to be able to read the budget. So that's the question I would throw back to you all. Senator Rothfuss.
So if we actually took action on cow, that would be the case, but we don't take action on cow for the budget. So cow, its entirety is effectively public opportunity to see the budget. So while it's true you get it 1 day sooner, you still effectively have all the weekend and the Monday before you really run out the clock for taking action, right? The way the proposal works, it would be end of cow, which would be on Monday, February 3rd, that you would have to have your amendments submitted. So, when the public window that's available includes the entirety of the weekend and really most of Monday too. If it were that we were taking action on cow with only 1 day and we were all allowed to amend, I think that would be a real concern. But since we've, long before either of us were in the legislature, eliminated amendments on cow, I feel like that's the public window of, you've got a lot of time to read it. That's my thought.
The only other thing I would raise on this issue is the members being able to form questions for the presenters in Cal. They're not even going to have read the budget for the first time. So whatever section they get to the first go around, nobody's going to know what it is or what questions to ask.
Mr. Speaker, the one thing I'll say on that is that a day is still substantially longer than you and I have experienced on occasion.
Yeah. All right, we are on a motion to Schedule C. Any other thoughts, amendments? If not, all those in favor of Schedule C signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. So we're good on that. Now let's move to the next topic, which is checking accounts for the Senate and House courtesy funds and the spouses fund. So Director Obrecht.
Mr. Chairman, during this interim, it came to my attention about how we have historically handled funds that legislators provide into 3 different accounts. One is the House Courtesy Fund, another is the Senate Courtesy Fund, and the third is what is termed the Spouses Fund. And Mr. Chairman, the House and Senate courtesy funds are used to pay for food out of the House or Senate break room, also gifts or cards for members or their family members when certain life events happen. Mr. Chairman, I came to realize, and I didn't know this before, LSO has never really been involved with these funds in the past. What had happened, Mr. Chairman, is long-term session staff had opened up checking accounts in their personal names to hold these funds in with really no structure to that at all, with tallies and deposits and withdrawals kept on a spreadsheet. And Mr. Chairman, as soon as I realized this, I was like, oh my gosh, this opens up an incredible amount of liability for that individual, but also probably for members who are contributing to it. And we need to develop a better structure for that. So Legislative Counsel Tamara Reveille and I discussed this. And what we came up with, but after Tamara researched it, is it's best for these 3 funds to be incorporated as nonprofit social clubs with the Wyoming Secretary of State's office to appoint a board of directors and to adopt bylaws for each of those three funds, and then to specify who has the authority to withdraw those funds, also to give tax ID numbers for those funds. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of what we did. And then Tamara has done a bunch of work to develop those articles of incorporation and those bylaws.
Tamara, why don't you go ahead and kind of make sure you go over the board members, because that's going to be kind of weird.
Sure, I can provide some background on what I think is probably your best way of organizing these legal entities and holding the funds to ensure that they'll be available for future members and that they're used. And staff had done an excellent job in the past of managing the funds, but going forward as staff transition, we think the LSO and the fiscal officer and the director as positions and the organization would be a better entity to make sure that there's continuity through the years, that these funds are always managed the way that they should be, and that there's bylaws and items we can point to, and to ensure there's no liability for the individual members who are involved in signing checks, and that all that is above board. And so legally, what these are nonprofit social clubs. It's a 501c7 under the IRS definition. It's things like dining clubs, some sororities and fraternities, HOAs. They're for the mutual benefit of the members, not the public in general. Because of course, the public doesn't benefit when you have snacks. It's each other benefiting when you have snacks or flowers or tokens of fellowship, that kind of thing. In Wyoming, they're called mutual benefit nonprofit corporations. And once these are formed by filing articles of incorporation, we just need one member, probably the Senate and the President and the President acting jointly for the spouses, to file those articles of incorporation. It's a $50 fee. Our fiscal agent, Ms. Cameraman, could serve as our registered agent. I'd simply file those, and then after those are filed, you'd have a formation meeting to adopt the bylaws. The bylaws are about 4 pages, standard terms. They would provide for the board. And what Matt and I thought would be appropriate, so there's no need to hold elections or decide who's going to have those duties, to just name them in the bylaws as the 5 members of Management Council for the House, the 5 members of Management Council for the Senate, and then all members of Management Council for the Spouses Fund. And then to similarly designate officers in the bylaws. President would be the president of the board, majority floor leader, the treasurer, minority floor leader, secretary, or a different organization or designation if you would like. We'd recommend the bylaws include provision for a financial audit in even years, to have our authorized signers be the director and the fiscal officer. And then, I became aware after the fact that issues come up of, well, what should we use the funds for? When do we send flowers? When do we send a card? The House does have guidelines. You could similarly adopt a resolution to kind of outline what you want checks to be signed for, and when you want to pay for name tags, or when you want to pay for a luncheon, those kinds of things. But that can all be done through resolution after the fact. It's a fairly simple form. Step 1 is just to file with the Secretary of State 3 articles of incorporation, $50 fees each. And then once that's done, we can, when you have time as members, you can hold your meeting and you can install your board of directors formally. And then we can apply for a tax identification number with the federal government. That's an EIN. That means that the organization is tax exempt. So when they're collecting fees, they're not having income that is tax due. It doesn't mean that you get a tax break for making a donation for a candy bar. Unfortunately, it's just the organization itself being tax exempt. We would either identify as a 501c7 on our annual 990 filings with the federal government, or we'd file a Form 1024 for a determination letter. Either way, I think it'd be a pretty simple tax exemption status. We'd have that EIN, and you could go down to First Interstate Bank, where the accounts currently are, and open 3 accounts. Then thereafter, there would just be annual record keeping and report due annually.
So a question I have before I go to everybody else, like on the House and Senate courtesy fund, what would happen if instead of that just being, what happens if we just have this, frankly, be part of the budget, be part of the feed bill? The amount for the candy bars and some lunches and a plaque once in a while, and could we just have that as part of our feed bill and just run it through the state rather than have two different accounts that way? Director?
Mr. Chairman, it is an option, but then what you open yourself up to as members, if we do that, is your per diem. Your per diem then likely is taxable income. That's the real trade-off. That's why this system has really been developed where you pay for the food you receive from the house instead of break rooms, so that you don't have to report your per diem as taxable income.
Thank you. Other questions from the body? Representative Zwanitzer.
Thanks. Two questions then. So that would be for meals, but if there were snacks, would that still qualify under the per diem? Because right now it's, we all chip in for pizza, and I understand there needs to be a structure. My actual question, as I was saying that, I've just forgotten. Hold on, it's going to come back to me. Nope, it's not. But when it does, I will let you know.
I'll go to Senator Rothfuss and then Representative Nyman.
I don't know that it makes that much difference, but I was just curious what the thought was about having one organization, one entity that serves all three functions. Was that internally complicated? What was the thought on that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I don't know if we gave it a lot of thought, and here's why. Again, we're inserting ourselves here into something that we haven't been involved in the past. These three organizations were set up completely independent and without any input from the Legislative Service Office. It only became apparent with the retirement of a long-serving Senate staff member who had taken all sorts of things upon herself, including this, that it became apparent to us that, hey, we need a solution to this moving forward. I didn't want to rock the boat any more than that.
And I can kind of weigh in on the spouse group a little bit. My wife, Sue, kind of helped with that organization, and it became clear to me that there really wasn't the money they were getting from their little group, and how it was housed, and then how they got money back out. It just wasn't clean. And I kind of brought that issue to the director, and then, there had already been discussions about the courtesy funds. And so I think that's where this all originates. Representative Nyman? Representative Zwanitzer came back with that question.
The coffee kicked in. The way we're setting these up, can you still accept donations from corporate or profit entities? Right now, we have lunches served by various lobbying groups, et cetera. If some outside group wanted to, chip in for pizza, would that be allowed under the bylaws as a social club to have an outside entity, purchase a dinner and have it go through that kind of a financial mechanism?
Tamara?
Mr. Chairman, yes, donations are allowed to a social club. They're not tax deductible for that organization because this isn't a charity. This is the private benefit of members. I don't know if you would even need to they could simply pay Pizza Hut directly rather than putting the money into the courtesy fund. Some other background on use of funds generally might be to answer prior discussion points is these funds are used for a variety of things. In the past, spouses funds have paid for name tags and flowers for past members when they pass away or cards. And so you do raise questions of whether that's for a private benefit or a public benefit. And it would, if you ran these funds through the public budget, it would raise questions about whether we would need to look at each expenditure and make sure it's for a public purpose. Also, the House Courtesy Fund is organized as a club already under Wyoming law, and it does have an EIN. So if we did choose to commingle these funds, we would want to be careful with making sure our disbursement and we would be changing it from funds that were set aside for House members to funds that are now commingled for House, Senate, and spouses. So there would be a little bit of paperwork to make sure we're all doing that appropriately.
Ellen, do you want to comment? I see you kind of moving up here. If you do, you're certainly welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Management Council. I was just going to mention that the other item, it's not substantial dollars, but we do provide gifts for leadership at the end of each session, and that's also run through this fund. So just something that we missed mentioning in the use of the funds.
All right, is there any additional questions of staff? If not, I'm going to go to public comment. Okay, public comment would anybody like to comment on the checking accounts for the courtesy fund and the spouses fund? Don't see anybody online either, right? Nope, we're good. All right, I think I'll close public comment, and Matt, I would assume you would want a motion to continue down this path or not, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, what we'd need, and you don't have a quorum right now, so maybe we take a break before that motion.
Here's a quorum.
Mr. Chairman, the motion would be to file articles of incorporation for these three entities, as discussed by Tamara, move and file the bylaws as she's described them, procure the tax ID numbers for those three organizations, and then have a meeting of the three Board of Trustees to approve the bylaws for those three entities. That would be the motion.
So moved.
It's been moved by Rothfuss, second by Zwanitzer, to do the motion that was laid out by the director. Are there any comments or questions on the motion? If not, sensing your urge to vote, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Director, please.
Mr. Chairman, and just to close this discussion, I could not commend the session staff members who took this on themselves enough. There was never any appearance or mention that funds weren't properly accounted for in every way possible. This is really to protect them more than it is members. And so I would like to thank them for taking this on. It was certainly above and beyond what was called for them.
Yeah, Director, I do. I want to thank all the staff that's done that over the years, and really, this is just to make it cleaner and to legally protect people. That's why we have Tamara sitting there. So we thank you, and with that, I think we'll take a break. It's about 10. Let's go till 10:20.
You are ready, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody back. We still do not have all of our people here, but we do have a quorum. Next up on the agenda is school finance recalibration. And I think there are some things that we are going to need to discuss in executive session, legal issues. And so I would ask a member to provide a motion to go into executive session.
I move we go into executive session.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. So we're going to kick everybody out but our staff and ourselves, and hopefully the others will come along shortly. Why?